Okay, so have you ever noticed how some things in English just sound a little off, even when you're pretty sure you've got the grammar right?
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
Yeah, and it's you can feel something's not quite right, but you can't always put your finger on exactly why.
It's those subtle things, those little nuances that can really trip you up.
Exactly. And today, we're diving deep into one of those sneaky grammar gremlins that I've noticed tripping people up.
Quantifiers.
Quantifiers. Oh, yeah, those are good ones. They're small, but they can really make or break your fluency.
Right. And for this deep dive, we're turning to You Talk Grammar 2 for some guidance on how to use these words correctly. Because, let's be real, nobody wants to sound like a robot trying to navigate the English language, especially when you're trying to have a natural conversation.
Right.
Imagine you're chatting with someone and you say, I have much work to do. It just doesn't sound right, does it?
It sounds so formal. So stiff, like something a textbook would say, not a real person.
Exactly. And that's because in that sentence, much isn't the best fit. You Talk Grammar the Second actually breaks down these distinctions really well. They remind us that much is generally used with things we can't really count. Uncountable nouns, like work in general. How much work do you have? You wouldn't say, how many works, would you?
How many works? That sounds like I'm some kind of art connoisseur talking about masterpieces. But okay, so much is for the uncountable stuff. What about when we can count things?
Then we bring in many. Think emails instead of just work. You say, I have so many emails to answer. Makes sense, right?
So much clearer. So we've got much for uncountable things and many when we can count things on our fingers. But what about those times when you want to talk about a big quantity in a more general way?
Ah, you're talking about our good friend, a lot of.
Right, like if I said I brought a lot of snacks to the party, or there's a lot of excitement about this project.
Exactly. A lot of is our wild card. It works for both countable and uncountable nouns. It's all about that general sense of abundance.
Our grammar wild card, I love it. So it's not just about being technically correct. It's about choosing the right words to get your meaning across in a natural way.
100%. And while a lot of is super versatile, sometimes you need to be a bit more specific with your quantifiers.
Okay, yeah, let's get into the specifics because I know there are a ton of other quantifiers out there, each with its own little shade of meaning.
It's like, imagine you're telling someone about this new cafe you tried. You say, there were few people there.
Ooh, yeah. It's like you're almost complaining about it being empty.
Right.
Like, oh, this place is dead.
Exactly. It has that kind of negative feel.
Yeah.
But if you said there were a few people there, it sounds more neutral. Like, okay, maybe it wasn't bustling, but at least you weren't totally alone.
Yeah, it's subtle, but it makes a big difference. It's like you said, those quantifiers can really change the whole vibe of a sentence.
They really can. And You Talk Grammar 2 goes on to point out another tricky pair. Less versus fewer. I don't know about you, but I've definitely mixed those up a few times.
Oh, tell me about it. Should I say less problems or fewer problems? Sometimes I just can't remember which one is right.
Well, the trick is to think about whether you can count the noun. Can you have one problem, two problems, three problems?
Yeah, you definitely can have multiple problems, especially when it comes to grammar.
Right, so because problems is countable, you'd use fewer problems. Less is usually reserved for things you can't really count, like less stress.
Less stress, more snacks. That's what I always say.
Mm-hmm.
Fewer for countable, less for uncountable. I think I can finally remember that. But you know what gets me every time? Little versus a little.
Ah, yes. The classic little versus little dilemma. It's a common one. But you know what I find interesting? Your native language can actually help you out here.
Oh, really? You mean how in Spanish I would just instinctively know the difference between saying poco dinero and un poco de dinero?
Exactly. You wouldn't say tengo poco dinero if you still had enough for coffee, right?
True. You'd want to use the un poco to signal that you still have at least some money left. And now that I think about it, have a little hope sounds a lot more optimistic than I have little hope.
Right. That little A packs a punch. It's amazing how much difference one tiny word can make.
And speaking of small things making a big impact, let's not forget about too much and too many.
Hit me with it. When would you use too much versus too many?
So remember that party we were talking about? Let's say you tell me I ate too much cake. Kind of makes it sound like you regret it a little bit, like maybe your stomach isn't too happy with you right now.
Oh, I've been there. Definitely know that feeling. But too many, that's where things get really wild, right?
Yeah, it's for when we're dealing with countable things, like there were too many people at the party. It can have a bit of a negative feel to it, like it was just overwhelming. Too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing.
Exactly. But then we have so many, which is kind of like It's more positive cousin.
Okay, so same party, different vibe. What's the difference between saying too many people and so many people?
Think of it this way. Too many people makes you want to find the nearest exit. But so many people makes you want to call up all your friends and say, hey, you got to get down here.
Huh. That's a perfect way to put it. It's like so many has that exciting, energetic feel to it without being overwhelming.
Spot on. It's all about that speaker's intention. What feeling are they trying to get across? And while we're on the topic of getting things across, there's one more quantifier quirk I want to mention that Utah Grammar Tundon points out. It's a pretty common trap, especially for Spanish speakers.
You mean the one where people accidentally use the singular form after any? Instead of saying, do you have any questions? They might say, do you have any questions?
That's the one. In English, when you're using any X questions or negative sentences with countable nouns, you got to go plural.
So even if you're just asking about one thing, it's, do you have any dogs? Not, do you have any dog?
You got it. It might feel a little strange at first, but the more you use it, the more natural it will sound, I promise.
This has been such an awesome deep dive. I feel like I'm hearing these words in a whole new light now.
That's what we love to hear. It's amazing how even the smallest words can have such a big impact on our fluency.
Totally. So to all our listeners out there, the next time you're speaking English, pay attention to those quantifiers. They might seem tiny, but they can really make a world of difference in how you express yourself. Until next time.